Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&As. Let's go ahead and get this started. If I only have a straight bar to work with, is just adding small bands, red rogue bands, for good mornings, a good variation for rep work, or will that take too much of the recovery doing rep work against bands? Would just doing RDLs for a phase be better? Also, when you have lifters, start incorporating max good mornings. All right, a couple different questions there. No, Rogue mini bands, that's 30 pounds of band tension. I'm going to assume that if you're pushing good mornings hard, you're going to be repping 200 plus pounds pretty quick. That's not really a lot of band tension. When I talk about recovery against bands, we're talking about pretty heavy bands. I don't think you're going to have real problems with minis because, again, red Rogue mini bands are 30 pounds per set when hooked up on a movement like that. So realistically, probably not. It would be a perfectly fine variation. So if you need some variation, you could definitely go to bands with it. You can also do different stances, right? You can do a real narrow stance. You can do a wider stance, right? That'll give you some variation on your good mornings also. You could also do them, you could change the amount of knee bend to change variations. You could also do them off of pins or off slings from a dead stop at the bottom. So if you don't have different bars and you need to rotate through different types of good mornings, just keep in mind you do have these options. You do have these options available. However, the bands give you, again, another set of options. And that's the beauty of something like mini bands, is that you don't need band pegs or a good setup to make them work. You can just hang them off dumbbells or plates, little bitty bands like that are only 15 pounds, and we can get a movement variation. And it also works for your max effort lifts, right? Because straight weight versus even 30 pounds of bands, totally different exercise. So then you would also ask, when do I start having lifters incorporate max good mornings? When I'm sure their core and low back is strong, when I am sure that they can perform a good morning correctly. And I oftentimes say things like, I'd like to see them repping 185 for at least 10 before we max on it. Some cases I'd like to see even more than that. But I've had lifters max sooner than that. In fact, one of my guys who you guys have seen a lot of his stuff that I have put up even publicly and in some of the collages, he was stuck at 185 for 10s when I used to let him do reps in reserve. One reason I don't like reps in reserve. And then I had him max on the good morning because he was doing 185 for 10s and claiming that's all he could do. Then he does 385 for a max, his first time doing it. You guys see a math problem there? Now he does like 275 for 10s, right? He's added basically a full extra plate per side. But realistically, when a lifter is safe to max on a good morning is when I can see them use respectable weight for high rep sets with good control, and I know that their low back is strong and that their core is strong, and that they know how to max on safer exercises, right? I want to see them maxing on box squats correctly, benching correctly, deadlifts. Once they can do all that combined with the other, I'll let them start maxing on good mornings. I'm just very leery of people who have, say, weak low backs. Just something I watch for. All right, next question. Asking for a friend who has a knee injury. He still works and walks fine. However, he feels pain when squatting. However, has no issues deadlifting. What sort of exercises would you recommend for someone in that situation? Is it safe for him to continue progressing on deadlifts since it doesn't bother his knee at all? Look, if this guy has some knee problems from the past, there's only so much I can really prescribe without knowing what's going on. But I would say generally if it hurts on squats, but it doesn't hurt on deadlifts, he's probably safe to do a lot of hip hinging, right? He's probably safe to do a lot of hip hinging. It should not be problematic for him. So that means he could push deadlifts hard. And I would say he could push other hip hinges hard. I would say good mornings. Let's come back over to again, a lift I insist that everyone do. If he can do that, he can do good mornings. Because a good morning does not put very much shear on the knee at all. Really, it's not going to do any more than the deadlift will. So I would say he could program lots of good mornings. He could do Romanian deadlifts. And then I would say, though, for quad development, he needs to look around and figure out what movements he can do without pain. He might find that he can do certain single leg exercises without pain, which will be fine. If he's squatting and doing good mornings already, that will actually build up similar amounts of muscle that he'll get from squatting. If he can find a single leg exercise that he can do pain-free, he'll probably have to stick with really high reps, Be very careful with his form. So he'll need to experiment and figure out what he can do without it hurting or inflaming the area. I would also suggest that, again, he very cautiously and starting with very light weights, see if he can learn to do box squats. Because again, box squats put less shear on the knee than other types of squatting because we have vertical shins, right? Properly performed box squats, the knees do not move forward at all. And if depending on how deep he goes, he may not have as deep of a knee angle either. So if he's stopping it parallel and he's able to do them correctly without his knees traveling forward at all, he might find that he can box squat. And if he can train the box squat, he might find that he can eventually put a lot of weight on the box squat. And that will allow him to build his quads. It'll allow him to build the connective tissue around the knee. Because that's the thing, if we can find movements we can do that we can load around an existing joint injury, we may be able to build better connective tissue and muscle around it to help alleviate some of it. There's no guarantee of that. He'll have to begin. I'd recommend proceeding with caution. I would recommend he even, run that by a physical therapist and see what they think about it. But it may be an option for him. But again, I would point out that he needs to be very, very careful with any of the true quad exercises I mentioned. Start out very light and assess it very closely. And it might be possible for him to find ones that he can do, but if he can't, then he can't. But good mornings, deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, all of that stuff should be good to go. And he can work on the hamstrings a lot. And that will probably help him stabilize his knee better over time. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. I am prone to shoulder overuse injuries because of my occupation, commercial drywall. Do you have any advice for preventative exercises? Thanks. Yeah, that can be tricky because I know it's involved with drywalling. Again, you're usually picking up large pieces of drywall, having to hold them. Again, puts a lot of stress on your interior deltoid, and then you're swinging a hammer a lot. But yeah, so picking up all that drywall, realistically, you're going to be prone to being very, very, very interior dominant in your shoulder girdles just because of your work. The upside, I would say, you don't ever need to worry about training your front delts, right? Worrying about training them is going to be a non-issue because they're going to get so much work that just your benching and other stuff will be fine. So in your case, what I would say is you need to look at this from a couple angles. Number one, obviously you don't want to be doing a bunch of extra front delt work, okay? You may not even want to do a lot of overhead pressing and stuff. Again, just something to think through because those muscles are being worked a lot. Be very careful in your bench grip. You need to find a bench grip that works really well for your shoulders. That will probably mean staying inside the rings all the time. Okay, it would be a wise idea. Those are points to look at. Again, being very careful of how deep of a stretch you get on chest movements. Things like dips might actually start to bother you, again, because of your profession. What I would look at even more importantly on top of that is building up your rear delts. Okay, because of the way this is going to load you, the best thing you could do on top of that is to rebalance the posterior side. I'm going to say you probably need to be doing a lot of upper back work. So what do we mean there? A lot of rowing, face pulls, rear delt flies. You can replace the rear delt flies with possibly band pull aparts, but you really need to make sure that you are balancing the posterior side there because the anterior side is getting overworked. You just need to be aware of that and try to balance it. And the main thing outside of that muscle balance that I would look for is being very careful about not worrying about training your front delts, right? You're going to want to minimize the amount you do for them. So again, stick with more of flat bench type movements, whether it's barbell, dumbbell. You could maybe do some incline, but again, I would assess how it feels. Assess how it feels, and see if it's overworking those areas. I probably wouldn't have you overhead press, again, unless you need it for sport-specific reasons. So those are the different things I would definitely look at in your situation, just to help minimize that risk of overuse because of the nature of your job. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.